Welcome to the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus on the Fantasy Sports Network. What's going on, everybody? I'm Dennis Farrell, joined by my good friend, the guy who's so vain he probably thinks this show's all about him. Get that 70s reference song right there. My good friend, my buddy, my pal, my brother from another mother, Dan Snyer. What's going on, Danny boy?
How you doing, Dennis? Glad to be here again. We're really running into the stretch run of this fantasy season, so it's getting really exciting. Obviously for most of us and everyone watching, your trade deadline was probably last Friday, so hopefully you took our advice from the last show, made some sell high, buy low type moves. And Dennis, why don't you touch on one? I think you kind of had a clairvoyant Dennis moment just to steal something from the BS report of Bill Simmons when you made a call last week that weirdly came true, and I want you to touch on that right now.
If you listened to the Fantasy Slant last week, I threw out that I thought Ahmad Bradshaw days were numbered of being a healthy running back. Unfortunately, I was right. Sadly, the beat goes on, and, hopefully he gets well soon. But for your fantasy team, this leaves a big hole. And, I don't know if it was like a Columbo moment where I unearthed a clue that, unraveled the whole situation. But to me, here's a running back that has just never been healthy. And I kind of figured, you know what? It's a good time to throw it out there. Do I have another guy on my hit list? Maybe. We'll talk about it later.
Oh, wow. We're going to get into another guy. I don't even want to know at this point, Dennis, because FBI's onto you now. There's a lot of people talking about this, Dennis, in the world. It was all over Twitter. Hashtag Dennis knows that. I don't even know what that means, but that's what the hashtag was. But in all seriousness, there were a lot of clues and a lot of facts that led to this, and it made Bradshaw a really good sell-high candidate, and his value was at an all-time high. So if you took his advice, probably got a nice return for him, and you can probably be thanking him, even though obviously we don't want to get too happy about an injury. But and on another note, I think this makes for a really, really interesting development in that Colts backfield, because I think every one of us has watched enough of Trent Richardson to know that he's probably not going to carry that load entirely for the rest of the season, because the Colts simply can't trust somebody who can't generate any yardage on his own. So I have a name that I want to talk about a little bit later in that Colts backfield that I'm really excited about, that I wrote a little bit about for Pro Football Focus Fantasy this summer. So we'll get to that in a little bit.
Well, we're talking about running backs. Let's talk about everybody's Week 11, Week 12 fantasy football darling that they're running out and picking up that I think is a bit of fool's gold that I'm not sold on. It's this Jonas Gray kid. Now, I'm a Patriots guy. I love my team. I'm from New England. I support them. But I do not like him one bit. I'm not wasting my number one waiver priority on him. Hopefully you have another guy, Corell or something like that out there that I would pick up before him. But, we're all wowed and zoomed by the 4 touchdowns and the 199 yards. But, give me the last consistent New England Patriot running back out there. You'd almost have to go back to the Corey Dillon days of running backs. But other than that, I don't think I can name one guy that got the whole workload. I think it's going to be the Shane Vereen show against Detroit. We saw that Andre Ellington, which is no secret, though, he catches the ball. But that's the way they're going to use him against New England. It's going to be Shane against Detroit. It's going to be Shane Vereen. I don't think you see too much of Gray. And if he does, you'll be lucky if he gets you 5 standard league points.
Yeah, I think you're spot on here, Dennis. I mean, if you just look over the course of the season, not just this season, that sample size can go back to, as you mentioned, seasons dating back way back to the Corey Dillon days. But if you look at just this season and that sample size, you'll see that game flow and game plan the running back snap distribution has been dependent on game flow and game planning. That's how Bill Belichick does it. He's not sitting around telling you, caring about your fantasy team. And against Detroit's front seven, with guys like Ndamukong Suh, with guys like Ezekiel Ansah, with guys that are just playing really well up front, this is a run defense, let's remember, that's holding opponents under 4 yards per carry. So, I mean, with a defense like that, it just doesn't make sense to me that he's going to plod, and I shouldn't say the word plod because Gray showed some solid bursts, but he's going to run Jonas Gray in between the tackles. This seems like you said, a Vereen type of game, because Vereen just matches up better with the Lions, and that's kind of just how I see this backfield going forward, a matchup-based backfield. And based on that, I don't want you to run to your wires and blow your load, for better use of words, on Jonas Gray, because in the end, you're going to see that there's going to be games, like you mentioned, Dennis, like this one against the Lions' tough run defense, where he gets maybe 40, 50 rushing yards on 12 carries. And, yeah, he averaged a solid number there, but he didn't get you anything in your fantasy leagues. And that's what it comes down to. So look at the schedule, pick and mix and match the games where you think the Patriots can simply do what they did against the Colts, and that's dominate the point of attack, dominate the line of scrimmage. I mean, we should have known that. We should have. I will say this, though, Dennis, when we talk about Gray. Some of us should have at least had a little bit of an inkling towards last Sunday's game, because if you look back at the Colts-Patriots playoff game from last year, Patriots did the exact same thing. They just dominated the point attack, ran it down their throats, and that's how you beat this Colts team, I think, or it's one way to beat them, I should say. So really look at the game plans, look at all those type of things, and that's how you'll play Gray. But don't go considering him an RB1 from this point on, because it's more of a fool's gold type situation.
I'll tell you this, if we're talking waiver wires and maybe just this week, give me Wes Welker over him. I would pick up Wes Welker. I think with Emmanuel Sanders out, with Orange Julius a little banged up, this is Wes Welker needs to be a productive fantasy wide receiver again. I like him a lot. And give me Trey Madison over him too. I think in St. Louis he's a guy. He's just been just as inconsistent. I get it. But I like him because he is the focal point of that run. It's not him based on this team up the middle, Shane Vereen catching the ball. I would take those two guys over him this week in my waiver wire pickups.
Those guys are still available for sure. It's tough to tell. I guess some leagues people have bailed on Welker, and he could make for a nice spot play. I've been reading that Julius Thomas is more of a day-to-day thing, and he's not in a walking boot, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I just can't go all in on Gray right now. It doesn't seem like a situation that makes sense to do it in.
I'm not going after Alfred Blue just yet. I did pick him up last week. He paid off, but I fully expect Arian Foster to be back this week.
I mean, one thing I do like about Blue, Dennis, to be honest, is that he did have 88 of his, I believe it was 165 yards rushing, or maybe 156, one of those two numbers, after contact. So it's not like he just saw the hole, ran through an open hole, and then got hit and went down. He made some plays after getting hit. So I kind of like Blue, and I was not sold on him at all. Before this week, he was a guy I would say, I'm not going to play him. I'm not going to add him to my team unless I have Foster. Now, I'll add him because you can't really predict Foster's health, and he's been injured a lot. And Blue showed me something. He really did.
Yeah, but, you're not starting him at all. You may just stash him on your bench, right?
Stash, yep, just a stash guy. And you just hope that Foster might, as you don't want to root for injuries, but you hope Foster might miss another game or two down the line.
Oh, all right. Well, when we come back here on the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus on the Fantasy Sports Network, we will get to our matchups. I know that every week this is one of your favorite things. Me and Dan right there will knock it out. You're listening, like I said, to the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. Dan Snyder and myself, Dennis Farrell, will bring you some more fantasy advice in just 2 seconds. We'll be right back. All right, guys, we're back. Welcome. Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. I'm glad you guys stuck around throughout the break to talk fantasy football with us. Dan, let's start breaking down a couple of these eye-popping matchups. Let's start with the Thursday night game. It's a game we tend to overlook because more times than not they've been blowouts, and I think we're going to go back to that. You have the Chiefs versus the Raiders, and the Raiders are just awful. I don't think there's a single Raider you're being forced to start this week. Although, after a letdown, and I got to tell you, Michael Riviera, I've been touting this guy. You got to pick him up. He's had touchdowns in, 2 of the last 3 games. He put up a big goose egg last week for you. But, I told someone to play him last week. He didn't do much. And then the guy tweets me like I'm ruining his fantasy team on purpose. Yes, tweeter out there. I woke up in the morning and said, whose team can I ruin with picking up Michael Riviera? It was his, apparently. But I think he has a good game in this matchup because I see the Chiefs, for the most part, shutting down this offense. And Riviera in a PPR league could have 5 to 7 catches.
Yeah, this is a matchup. I know there's been some blowouts and a lot of points on these Thursday night games, aside from this Bills-Dolphins matchup last week. But I really see the air being taken out of the ball in this one, and this is one I'd like to avoid in all my daily leagues. I don't see points coming. I mean, just look at this Chiefs offense. They threw the ball 16 times last game. In an entire 4 quarters, 16 pass attempts. That's crazy. I hadn't seen anything like it, and they won the game. So I don't see them straying too much from this game plan. The Raiders have not been that strong against the run at all. They've been one of the worst teams according to Pro Football Focus. And for me, it makes this matchup one I would like to avoid in dailies. You obviously have your mainstays, Jamal Charles, And then you got to look at a guy like Travis Kelce. I mean, so last week he played his highest percentage of snaps by far. He was on the field for over 95% of the snaps. So you think, okay, that's a good thing. Well, maybe not, because the Chiefs only threw the ball 16 times, so he had 13 pass routes. So, I mean, he's not going to do anything with that amount of routes, snaps and route, of course. So you don't want to get a guy going there. So I still think there's a line of inconsistency there for as good as he is in the red zone. But one guy I do want to touch on in this matchup, and not a guy I want to play this week, but a guy I want to put on your radars, and a guy I would like you guys to end your fan off the free agency wire this week is Latavius Murray, running back on the Raiders. So we all saw Murray in the preseason. We all looked at the guy, 6'3", 200, about 210 pounds, runs like a 4.4 flat. He is a size speed freak, and everyone who's seen this guy run has been wanting him to get a chance. He catches the ball out of the backfield, and then finally, last game, after 9 straight losses, the Raiders said, okay, maybe we can start looking towards the future. And he led the backfield in snaps. He had 27. McFadden and MJD combined for 32. So he still can get 50% of the snaps, so he's not a guy I want to recommend. But keep him on your radar, because as we always talk about on the show, talent wins out, and it really does in fantasy football. So he could be the guy who actually becomes that playoff stretch free agent pickup that really becomes maybe a plus flex play, an RB2 type thing. And keep an eye. He's got the talent, and hopefully the role will come with it.
More times than not, I would probably skip over the Falcons-Browns matchup, but we got to talk about Josh Gordon coming back. I have him immediately in my lineup. I'm starting him in one league. I am excited. This is like Christmas for me. I compared Stash and Josh Gordon all year long as a trade deadline move that costs you nothing. You automatically get the best wide receiver from last season into your lineup. I expect instant payoff from this kid, even against the woeful Falcons defense.
Yeah, I mean, there's one worry to this matchup, and I'm not even worried about it because I love Gordon this week, and I think you stashers are very, very lucky guys and gals right now to get him going. But the one worry is that he might be shadowed. He said, Atlanta coach said it might happen. They haven't decided yet, by Desmond Trufant, who's been a really, really, really good corner for the Falcons this year. He's a top 20 corner on Pro Football Focus and pass coverage grade. So, I mean, if he shadows him, can that shut him down a little bit? Maybe, but this is a guy who's so talented that he can take a crossing route to the house. We saw that happen last year, and I mean, let's remember the X receiver in in the Shanahan offense. It's Kyle who's running this one. The X receiver gets a lot of high percentage routes and a lot of targets. He steps right into that role. I don't see a lull for him. I see him really, really having a good week, and people are going to be really happy with it. I'm unfortunately not one of them, because in every league I was in, he was drafted in stash. But for all you who have him, good luck. Enjoy.
You know, I was forced, as I said on last week's show, I'll say it now, I was forced into making a trade because I lost Foles, I lost Palmer. I made a trade where I got Josh Gordon and Cam Newton, which, by the way, once again, my other prediction paid off where Cam Newton would have a couple extra touchdowns, put up a 20-point fantasy week, but he paid off for me. But all I had to give up was Julio Jones and ODB. And, you know, it was a steep price to pay. But come this week, I feel all right. Like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The gods from the fantasy heavens have cried upon me that you will make a playoff run, Dennis Farrell.
Yeah, well, it's always good when the fantasy gods talk to you. They were talking to me a lot last year, as you can see by my league trophy that I finally got a hang of again. But listen, even if he does, let's say, have some kind of like 6 for 70 type game, I wouldn't even get too worried because he's just such a dynamic talent and he's in such a good fit. I mean, this offense, as I just mentioned, is so perfect for his skill set, perfect for a guy like him, and I'm really excited to see what he can bring to the table. And for you, Dennis, good luck, because you gave up a steep price, and I bashed you for it a little bit last week, but so far so good with Cam's great game and with Gordon on the horizon.
I got pretty lucky. Let's talk about the rest of this Browns team. Ben Tate has been dropped. They released him. Fantasy football coming to life, I guess. He might be co-hosting with us one day looking for a job. It's that bad. You know, maybe he'll be in Pittsburgh. That's the speculation there. But Brian Hoyer, to me, is a start. I like him this week. The Falcons' defense, like I said, is not very good. Hoyer has been average at best fantasy-wise. But if you're looking for – if you're bit by the quarterback injury bug, And Brian Hoyer is available in most of your fantasy leagues, so feel free to go out and pick him up and play him with confidence this week.
Well, yeah, he's got Josh Gordon back, so that's awesome. I mean, that automatically boosts his outlook. But you have two things to look at it here. So, one, the Browns are a team that simply would prefer to run the ball, I assume. I mean, last week Brian Hoyer had 50 pass attempts. I doubt they want to have that repeat itself, especially because 30 of those went incomplete. But at the same time, this Falcons defense is surprisingly better against the run than you would think, and teams have not been beating them by running on them as much as they in recent weeks as they've been throwing on them. Carolina could not get anything going in the run game, for example, aside from one D'Angelo Williams outside run, and that's the whole game. And then Cam Newton started throwing the ball with success. So it really works out matchup-wise in their favor, and I think the Browns will have to decide to rely on Hoyer again. And with Josh Gordon at his disposal, I think you could be looking at a big week.
Falcons side of the ball, Matt Ryan, I think he'll have a good day. But to me, a Matt Ryan good day now is 230 and 2 touchdowns. If that. This offensive line is horrid. It's affected everybody. Roddy White actually finally had a good game. Julio Jones had an okay day. It depends on who Hayden lines up against, but Julio Jones is the new guy on my watch list for injuries. There's nothing that's standing out, but it just seems like when you need Julio Jones the most, he seems to just kind of get hurt, get banged up. Something seems to happen to him down the stretch run. And this is my next guy. I got the Bradshaw one right. I'm hopefully will not go 2 for 2, but I'm telling everybody, worry about Julio Jones. I've got that gut feeling. Nothing, like I said, I don't have a cauldron. I'm not stirring it. And, the witches of Eastwick have told me get rid of Julio Jones or anything. But to me, I'm worried about him going forward.
Yeah, I mean, my worry, Dennis, is I'm worried about him too, I should say. But I'm not as worried about him getting injured as I am about the fact that Falcons' offense isn't making big plays. As you mentioned, the offensive line kind of stymies the entire offense. And a lot of people on Twitter this week were showing off Julio's stats and his receptions and yards, which are very, very good. He's on pace for I think it was 102 receptions and over 1,400 yards, and saying, okay, well, he's a clear touchdown regression candidate in the sense that he's only going to regress towards the mean and score more touchdowns because touchdowns are mostly a factor of luck, and they tend to regress. But I just don't know if I see that because I don't see this Falcons offense scoring that much. They're not making big plays. If they couldn't do it last week against that Panthers secondary, I mean, I just don't know if they're going to do it going forward. That really, really surprised me to see Matt Ryan not put up big plays against that secondary because you just saw a week before Mark Sanchez light him up, and Mark Sanchez, as we saw this past week, is still Mark Sanchez.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Lions-Patriots matchup. I'll give you my thoughts and concerns on this matchup. To me, everybody thinks it's a no-brainer, but I say nay, not quite yet. I don't think this matchup is a no-brainer coming from a Patriot fan. You're listening to Dan Schneider, myself, Dennis Farrell, on the Fantasy Sports Network, the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. That's a mouthful. When we come back, we'll talk Patriots-Lions matchup. We'll be right back. All right, guys, we are back. Thank you for sticking around. It's the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. Dan Schneider, myself, Dennis Farrell. Dan, before we roll into this Lions-Patriots matchup, where can people find you?
Yeah, if you're looking for me, you can find me at Twitter, at Dan Schneider. That's SCHNEIER, NFL. Right now I'm currently writing for Fox Sports about real football, obviously Pro Football Focus Fantasy about fantasy football. I've got 3 articles a week, and we obviously do the Slant. And then I'm also contributing to Sportable, which is an interesting new site that you should definitely check out at sportable.is. So kind of everywhere right now. That's how I want to be during the football season. I love this stuff. It's my life, and I couldn't have asked for a better one. How about you, Dennis? Where can we find you?
You can also find me over at Fox Sports, but Fox Sports Detroit. I'm doing fantasy football videos over there. Go check out the site, 97.1 MFM News Talk St. Louis. I'm doing fantasy football videos there. You can find me here at Pro Football Focus. You can also find – I got so many things going on. My regular podcast, the F Word. Go rate, subscribe, leave a comment on that one, guys, here on the Fantasy Sports Network, too. That airs Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can follow me on Twitter, Dennis77Farrell, Farrell. All right, Lions Patriots, to me, people think this is going to be a no-brainer. Patriots put up 40. But I tell you what, I don't know what to expect from this matchup. Part of me feels like this could be a 14-7 or 17-10 ball game. If I'm picking up defenses, I'm picking up the Patriots defense. I think Matthew Stafford's habit of throwing interceptions will get him in trouble in this matchup. I could see a fumble in this matchup. The Lions, Tom Brady's very protective. He did throw a pick or two the other night. To me, the true stars of this game are going to be the defenses fantasy-wise. And look, Calvin Johnson's going to be Calvin Johnson. I don't know what Reggie Bush should play is going to do. We talked about Fareen's probably going to be the guy in this matchup. You're going to want to get Edelman. You're going to want to get Gronk. But to me, I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Vegas has this one pinned at 48 as the over-under, and that's it's actually the fourth highest of the week. So, I mean, they see it a little differently than even me or you, Dennis, which makes it interesting. But I don't know. I mean, this Detroit team has played such good defense all year. Even last week, after the two big plays that they gave up to Stanton and Floyd, they kind of shut it down there. And at the same time, their offense has really struggled. If you look back at that game, I rewatched the game rewind on that one first of the week because I wanted to see what happened to that Lions offense against this Cardinals defense. And what you see is Stafford missing on a lot of easy throws. So a lot of those flat passes and quick hitters, he was just off on. He was inaccurate, to be quite honest. And his footwork has been a little sloppy this year. They tried to work on that in the offseason. That was a big goal of Jim Caldwell, and that's why they brought him in, apparently. But the offensive line hasn't been that great, and that's kind of stymied his progression through that from a footwork perspective. So, I mean, I'm not counting on them to put up big numbers against this Patriots secondary. That's really and pass defense overall that stayed really strong despite the loss to Chandler Jones. And I got to give them credit for that because I thought Chandler Jones being out would kind of tank that defense, but they found Akeem Ayers off the trade with the Titans, and he's had some nice pressures in spot duty, and they're really just holding up in coverage for the most part. So I like them on that side of the ball. And then the other side of the ball, I think Belichick can come up with a game plan to attack this Lions defense. I don't think they'll score a ton of points, but when you've got Gronk on the field and you have Vereen running out into the flat, it really stretches a defense and puts the pressure on them. And since Gronk has really become this healthy beast that we all know him as, the Gronk we love, and can we just talk after this for at least a second about the play he made? But we'll touch on that maybe in a second. But since he's kind of got back to the old Gronk, as if that's the best way to describe it, Patriots offense hasn't really been stopped. So I don't see this defense as one that's going to do it. I don't really see any defense stopping them with a healthy Gronk. Do you see it differently with Gronk? I mean, can you believe the play he made?
Oh my gosh, that was total. That, you know what? If there was a tight end beast mode, it would be him.
Yes.
I'm ready to throw Skittles at this guy. It was so crazy. But you're right. But on the flip side, all season long, we all were ready to call this Lions defense fake frauds. Sham artists. They went into the season. We thought they'd be horrible like they always have. They made no real major upgrades. But this is and they consistently played like a great defense. Against Arizona, they gave up 14 quick points, but they held down and kept them in check when you really thought this game could get out of hand. Gronk could get a touchdown. I'm giving the Patriots 2 touchdowns in this matchup. Who's going to get them? I don't know. Yeah, I would suspect maybe an Edelman-Gronk combo or something like that. But I think this Lions defense is going to be good enough to let Brady give up a ton of yards, but it's going to be a field goal fest, at least in my eyes, or a shutdown fest. I think they will bend, but they will not break in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, and I see it pretty similar. I mean, I don't think they're going to shut them down completely, as I just said, but I wouldn't expect too many points. I mean, looking at the year from DeAndre Levy in the middle of that defense and run defense for the Lions, he's been unbelievable this season to go along with, obviously, their beasts up front. So this just touches on what we mentioned before. Those expecting Jonas Gray to run through holes and into linebackers who aren't filling, get that thought out of your head because it's clearly not going to happen against this Lions defense.
The next matchup before we go to break again, let's talk about this Jets-Bills matchup. Normally, I wouldn't even talk about it, but there's going to be a foot of snow on the ground. I love these games. I'm really excited. And, Chris Ivory, to me, is going to be a must start. Snow, cold weather. He's been on a roll as of late. Give me Chris Ivory in this matchup. I don't know who's going to win the matchup. Fred Jackson, give me Fred Jackson in this matchup. This is going to be a run fest. Although I may take both defenses. Once again, the Bills have been great. The Jets have a good defense, but the Jets are, available in a lot of fantasy leagues. I think the cold weather, and especially if it's snowy, this is going to be a great matchup for defenses.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, if I could call them up right now on the Jets and get you to run as the offensive coordinator on the Jets, I'll play Chris Ivory. But since I can't do that, I can't play the guy because he's still seeing about or less than 50% of the offensive snaps. I mean, they want to work in Chris Johnson, they want to work in Bilal Powell, and that caps his upside, man. I can't get on board with a guy not playing a majority workload, and that's kind of where we're at with Chris Ivory, and it hasn't changed over the last few Jets games. So I'm not on that bandwagon, and on Jackson, I can't get on board with that either because I guess it was the second or third season in a row, the Jets have dominated Pro Football Focus's run defense collectively overall. The run defense grade, and they're just a defense you watch on tape. Nothing gets through that interior. Until I see a healthy Jackson, I'm not sold on him running amok on the Jets defense. To me, this snow game is going to be, as you said, a defensive struggle with a few crazy fumbles and crazy plays that put some weird points on the board, like defensive touchdowns, special teams type stuff. But for the most part, I don't see an offensive explosion from either team.
You know what? I think snow is always a game changer, and when you throw snow into the mix, you have to throw out all the numbers. I think it's an equalizer, and
that's true.
I don't know. I think you're more right about Fred Jackson than Chris Ivory. I think Chris Ivory will get all of his fantasy points on 2 plays, which will be big plays out of the backfield, short little dumps, because he can catch the ball. He's really good at that. And in a snow game, and they're going to watch the run, I think that's the kind of play that will get Chris Ivory like a crazy 82-yard run in the snow, and he's doing snow angels, and we're all celebrating going to the playoffs because Chris Ivory got you 12 fantasy points.
No, it's not a bad call, Dennis, because he makes yards after contact, and he makes people miss. And in the snow, it probably works to his favor. I actually like it. Even on limited snaps, I think he could do some stuff here.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk more fantasy matchups here. This is a very critical week for all of your fantasy teams. Dan and myself, Pro Football Focus, they don't just hire any slubs off the street to talk fantasy football. And if they did, it wouldn't be me and Dan. We'd be somewhere else. But we're here. We're doing the fantasy slant for you with your week, what are we, 12 now? Week 12 matchups? Yeah, it's crazy, man. This season has flown by so quick.
So fast.
So when we come back, we'll talk some more Week 12 fantasy matchups. Maybe we'll talk Buccaneers Bears. I don't know why, but someone's got to do it. You're listening to the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus on the Fantasy Sports Network. We'll be right back. All right, guys, we're back. Dan Snyder, myself, Dennis Farrell, talking fantasy football Week 12. Dan, where can people find more of your work?
So, yeah, you'll find me on Pro Football Focus Fantasy. I got 3 columns a week there, and we obviously do the Fantasy Slant podcast. You can find me on Fox Sports. I'm doing a lot of articles on the Cowboys recently, but also I do the power rankings every week. So go ahead, go over there, troll me because I put a 7-3 team over a 6-4. I mean a 6-4 team over a 7-3. And then also Sportable.ia is a new site coming up that you're going to know about really soon. So kind of trying to be all over the place. You'll find any and all of that content at Twitter for me. So shoot me a follow at Dan Schneider NFL. How about you, Dennis? Where can we find all your work?
Listen, just follow me on Twitter. That's all I care about. Follow me. If you follow me, the next 8 people that follow me and tell me you heard the podcast or the TV show, I'll follow you back. I don't care about that stuff. The next 100,000 people that follow me, I'll be grateful. How about that? Let's give me 100,000 followers. That's probably not going to happen unless I'm like Kim Kardashian. By the way, kudos, Kim. I love what you did. I can't lie. I'm a Kim fan.
Oh, man, Dennis, I'm not on that bandwagon. She's a mother.
Oh, yeah, I wish they made mothers like that when I was younger.
Think about when that kid has to see that picture of her.
Oh, you know what that kid will do? We'll take a bath in $100 bills and cry away something.
You know what? You're right.
I tell you what, God bless my mom. She's a saint. But if my mom looked like that and I was that rich, I wouldn't care what she was doing.
That's fair. That's a good point. Money makes problems go away easily.
That's right. All right, let's talk some fantasy matchups. You have the Buccaneers, Bears. I think Evans is still catching passes today. I mean, he ended the day with like 202 yards. I was shocked. I was more shocked that a Tampa Bay quarterback threw for 200 yards.
Yeah, Dennis, like I was just as surprised as you to see Josh McCown do that because we haven't seen it from all season. But if you look at Mike Evans, this is a guy who's 6'5", ran a 4.5 flat at the combine, had a good vertical, looked really explosive in drills, and dominated the college scene. Like he had games at Texas A&M where people would say, "Oh, it's because he has Johnny." No, it's probably because Johnny had him. I mean, he was putting up 260 one game. I think it was 269. He had over 200 in another one, and that was only last season. This is a dominant player, and I think we're at the point where we can call him a wide receiver one going forward. The talent's there, the targets are there, the red zone targets are there. He has taken over Vince Jackson's old role in that offense, and what we're seeing is a guy who you should just lock in and feel confident about every week. I love Mike Evans.
You know, I had to trade him away in a keeper league. I was excited to draft him. I picked him up. I sat on him. And then I ran into some quarterback troubles, and I ended up flipping him, beginning of the season for Aaron Rodgers. So I don't feel like I'm sad to see him go. I feel like I got great value for him in return. But going forward, yeah, you're 100% right. He's definitely going to be, and he's not going to get 200 yards a game. He may not even get 100 yards a game, but you know what he will get? Touchdowns.
Yeah, he will. And how about Charles Sims in this backfield, right? Because Charles Sims, the waiver wire, the guy everybody was talking about weeks and weeks in a row, stash this guy, get on board. Oh, he saw 33 snaps, and Bobby Rainey only saw 19. He guess he's becoming more of the lead back there, but he averaged 2.8 yards per carry and turned 3 receptions in the passing game to 8 yards. So I'm not going to buy in with him yet. That offensive line sucks. Doug Martin's returning soon, and he'll probably throw a wrench into that timeshare and workload. So, listen, you can look at that box score and look at it two ways. One, Sims got the bulk of the share of the carries, so good for you, and you like him going forward. Or two, he's just not really ready to contribute this season, and that's kind of how I see it with the Sims situation.
Doug Martin. He's either the poor man or the rich man, Trent Richardson.
Yeah, he certainly has been the past 2 seasons. I don't know what happened to his rookie season. And you know what? I guess you can say the same about Trent Richardson because he was really good in his rookie season too. So I guess these guys are one-year wonders. Does that make any sense? I don't know. To me, that makes no sense how you can fall off like this.
Welcome to fantasy football. Let's
Yes.
talk about the Bears. As much as we bagged on Cutler, he left Sunday's game with 33 fantasy points for a quarterback, which was amazing. He still looked like Cutler at times. Maybe you call it on the matchup, but going against Tampa Bay, I think Cutler walks out with another 22 to 25 fantasy points.
I'm with you, Dennis. This is a top play this week. I mean, there were times during that game against the Vikings where you thought you saw the old Cutler and the old Mark Trestman offense. They were pushing the ball forward. They were moving it down the field with snaps and just big plays at big times. And really, when you saw that happen, you're like, okay, are we back? Do we have this Bears offense that we've seen for weeks and for a whole season last year? And I thought that we did. But then, of course, there were times that they stalled, as you mentioned. But overall, I think that you have to look at 2 things. One, the Vikings is not an easy matchup. They have been playing really good defense for a long time. So this matchup gets easier for him against the Buccaneers. Yeah, the Buccaneers played solid against the Redskins, but it was RG3, a guy who hasn't really shown much this season and much since his rookie season. So I think that he's a good chance to really put up points this week.
You know what? Call off the search. Call back the dogs. Call off the helicopters. Make the search party come back. We found Alshon Jeffries. Who knew he was in Minnesota this whole time? It was crazy. I'm glad that we found him. Listen, hopefully this is the Alshon Jeffries we get on this playoff stretch because I need him. I need a big Alshon. If you're listening, man, keep up doing what you're doing. I don't know what you did different than you did the rest of the year, but look at me, man. Look at me, Alshon. Produce for me. Daddy needs some money. Help me out.
Yeah, listen, I think he'll do it for you, Dennis. I really do. He looked awesome at times, and it's really a matchup thing for them. If they could beat up on that Vikings defense that had looked pretty solid, I can see some more coming forward for you and Jeffrey.
What was the difference? What did Alshon do, or what did Jay Cutler do different? What did they do different against Minnesota that's been missing the rest of the year?
To me, I just thought they kind of got back to some of the staples of that offense and some of the plays they used to run last year to such a greater degree of success than they have this season. And they got back to that. And you know what? That offensive line had some makeshift players in there, but it protected pretty well for Cutler at times. And of course, we say at times, because there were times where they stalled a little bit. And I thought that was the difference, getting back to some of the ways that had worked for the Bears.
Let's move on to the Redskins 49ers matchup. Quickly, what are your thoughts on this? Because there's, other than Alfred Morris, I'm not sure there's a Redskin I'm okay with starting here.
There's so much turmoil in D.C. right now, Dennis. I cover this team for Fox Sports every day, and the articles coming out of there are absolutely absurd. It goes from Robert Griffin calling out Deshaun Jackson and his teammates, to Deshaun calling out Robert, to Gruden calling out Robert Griffin, to people telling they want Robert Griffin gone, to people making the case for Colt McCoy being a better overall starter for them and a quarterback for them for that offense. And if you look at the numbers, they kind of coincide with that. But for me, you're just seeing some of the issues you saw with Griffin throughout his career, except for his rookie season. He really has poor footwork. He displays it often. And they lost Trent Williams last week, and that's a huge, huge injury for them. I mean, he's their best offensive player for my money, and an all-pro left tackle. And in his absence, there's going to be even more pressure. So I'm just not buying into that Redskins passing offense based on it. And as you said, Morris is a solid play. They're going to look to get him going even more this week. That's what a lot of the talk has been centered around, taking the ball out of Griffin's hands. But besides him, I'm with you. I'm out.
If Colin Kaepernick's available in any of your leagues, he's actually available in 2 of my leagues, this is the week you want to start him. I think Colin Kaepernick has 275 yards passing, give me 2 touchdowns, and maybe 1 on the foot.
You know what, Dennis? It seems like it should be, and it's a great matchup. So I think you could be right. The Redskins have really been reeling in the secondary and on pass defense ever since Brian Orakpo went down, and they had to jettison Trent Murphy into the starting lineup at outside linebacker. But at the same time, I just didn't love what I saw from Colin Kaepernick last week against the Giants, and that's been the same thing I've seen all season. He misses on a lot of throws. If you get over the Crabtree missed tackle by Giant safety Quinton Demps, he would have had a really, really weak day from a passing yardage standpoint last week. And it's just a lot of inaccuracy and missed throws. I'm not buying into Colin Kaepernick. I'm not on the same bandwagon. Yes, this is a great matchup, but I think it could be one of those where everyone buys in daily and his share is really high, and it makes for a time you kind of want to be contrarian and avoid the matchup and kind of focus on the struggling player instead. But that's just me, Dennis. I'm just not in on Kaepernick.
You know what? Fair enough. And I'm talking strict waiver wire pickup. Would I play Kaepernick over Rivers? No. Would I play Kaepernick over Cutler? No. I think I might play not against Texas. I don't think I could play Dalton against that. Would you go Stafford? There's an equal matchup. Would you go Stafford versus the Patriots over Kaepernick versus Washington?
I think I'd go Kaepernick there. As I said, I wasn't too thrilled on Kaepernick, but we just talked in extensively about how I'm not thrilled about Stafford either against this Patriots secondary, especially after the Cardinals handled him last week. So, I mean, I would take Kaepernick there based on the matchup, but I just think that the contrarian play might be to sit him in your dailies and not get too excited about this matchup.
All right, when we come back from our final break, we'll wind the show down with a little Ravens-Saints talk. That's going to be your Monday night matchup. And then we'll do a little bit more selfless promoting because that's what Dana and myself are pretty good at. So stick around for that. You're listening to the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. That's right. Dan Snyder, myself, Dennis Farrell, talking some fantasy football here on the Fantasy Sports Network. Channel 148, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Channel 367 in Virginia, West Virginia, and parts of Maryland. So when we come back, take a listen. Just pull up a chair, be a part of the show. That's what we all do best. Welcome home, guys. Week 12. All right, guys, welcome back. The Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus. Talking Week 12. Dan Snyder, myself, Dennis Farrell. Talking fantasy football. Helping you out. Break up matchups. Anything. Everything. Everywhere you want to be. Dan, quickly, where can people follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, so at Dan Schneider NFL, that's DANSCHNEIER, and I'll post everything I got there.
All right, and you can follow me on Twitter. No, you better follow me on Twitter. How about that? I'm not doing this show because I like actually. So follow me anyways. All right, at Dennis77 Farrell, the Fantasy Slant powered by Pro Football Focus here on the Fantasy Sports Network. Go check the network out. If you don't have the network, go look them up online. You can watch it live from your computer. If you do have them on your cable channel, I don't know why you're switching over to TBS and watching Friends. That's not where you need to be. Ross and Rachel ain't going to tell you who to start and who to sit this week. We are. Dan Snyder, myself, Dennis Farrell. Let's talk this last matchup real quick. Ravens Saints. I love me some Joe Flacco in this matchup. I've got a waiver wire bid in for him right now. Hopefully I land him and he can lead me to victory.
Yeah, as the final matchup for the week, this Monday nighter, I'm buying in daily leagues. This one has a really high over under. Vegas has this one as, I believe, just to double check, the second highest over under for the week. They're expecting points. I'm expecting points. I like Flacco, as you mentioned, but I kind of love Breeze to get going in this one. A little shady thing people aren't really putting too much thought into is the fact that the Baltimore Ravens took a major blow in their secondary. Jimmy Smith, done for the year. Ladarius Webb has really struggled across from him. They've got a lot of kind of wishy-washy type guys back there in the secondary that I just don't trust to hold up in coverage. And this Saints offense is going to be pissed. They're basically playing for their season. I mean, not in the NFC South. I guess there's no such thing as playing for your season. You can probably drop to 4-7 out of a chance, but I think they'll come out strong. I think they'll really do well there. And on the other side of the ball, you really have to look at the Saints secondary and say they're kind of back to their old ways against Dalton and the Bengals. They looked like the team we saw for the first half of the season before that Packers game. So yeah, this one to me is going to be a lot of passing offense and a lot of running offense too. It's just a lot of offense for me in this one, Dennis.
You know what? Give me Marquise Colston in this matchup. He's been benched in most leagues for the most part with Cooks. Brendan Cooks has been placed on the IR. Yep. You know, I think Colston will see his targets, especially in a PPR league. If there's one week I'm playing him, it's going to be this week. Drew Brees, people have been benching Drew Brees a lot in leagues. This is the week I'm playing Drew Brees. Yeah, I love it. Merry Christmas. This is going to be your fantasy Christmas game, I think.
I'm with you, Dennis. These offenses don't tend to run too much no huddle, too much up tempo. People may think, okay, it's not a matchup I won't invest in, but Vegas has this set really high for a reason. That's because there shouldn't be too much defense in this one. So I'm really feeling good about Forsett, Mark Ingram. Ingram played over 80% of the snaps last week, even though the Saints fell behind. That's great news from a game flow perspective because Travaris Cadet had played 33 snaps the week before when they fell behind. So I think they're kind of leaning back towards Ingram. They know he's the way to go. He can catch the ball too. So you know what? Roll with Ingram, Forsett, Torrey in this one. Colston should get Cooks' targets. Jimmy should get some. It's a fantasy extravaganza in this one.
All right, guys, that's your Week 12 fantasy matchup powered by Pro Football Focus. That's the Fantasy Slant Fantasy Sports Network. Remember, quickly, head over to thefantasyjocks.com. That belt right there is from Fantasy Jocks. It's a great company. They help sponsor the Fantasy Sports Network and whatnot. You can get a lot of great stuff here. I'll even show you. They sent me something nice, guys. If hopefully you can see it on the show, take a gander at that. That's a Fantasy Jocks Fantasy Championship ring. I earned it, by the way. It wasn't given to me. I earned it. That's one. So go over to Fantasy Jocks if you're looking to spice up your league. And by the way, if you're in one league, one day with leagues, DraftKings guys, we haven't talked enough about it. Maybe you're out, and maybe you're just listening to the show because you're jogging or you're driving to work and you miss it. Try these one-day fantasy leagues. You know, even if you're out, set your lineup up, do it within the budget they give you. You can win real money. And by the way, you put $10 into DraftKings, you get Pro Football Focus Gold for free for the rest of the season. You can get Dan Snyder's work just like that for free. Guys, you have to do it. It's a great buy. Dan, I love DraftKings.
Yeah, I can't speak enough to how good of a job DraftKings does. I mean, not to crap on FanDuel or any reason, but my money's in DraftKings because they got the flex position while FanDuel has the kicker. So you can't go wrong. You don't want to have a lucky kicker ruin your daily week. And remember, all you got to do is invest $10 in DraftKings. You play that money, you can win on that money, and then you get fantasy gold for free. It's the best deal. I'm sure a lot of you have already done it. And for those of you who haven't, take a look at it. You can read more details on Pro Football Focus Fantasy.
There you go, guys. That's your week 12. Good luck. We'll see you week 13. Hopefully you win. Hopefully I win. Hopefully Dan wins. Hopefully we all win. But someone's got to be a loser, and hopefully it's not the three of us. Have a good week, and we'll see you guys later.